everybody. Thank you so much for having us. We both came here from after a very long flight, so we're both very tired, but we're very excited to be here. My name is Timna, this is Aviad, and we're representing an organization called My Truth. So as Lindsay said, I want to start my story by telling you about the scholarship that I managed. The scholarship was funded, I did it as a student, and it was funded by an organization, an Israeli organization called Peres Center for Peace. And Peres, Shimon Peres, was an Israeli president for several years. He was a prime minister in the 90s, and he had a lot of involvement in the peace process in Israel. So the center, which its main issues is to bring together Arabs and Jews in Israel, was named after Shimon Peres. So the program that I participated in was, the target was to bring together Jewish girls and Palestinian girls by playing soccer together. So there were teams. Each team was or a Jewish team or a Palestinian team. It was twin teams, twin cities. And I was in charge of the whole process. And each team had a student that followed the group, had different activities with the girls, and on several occasions we would meet only the students, the Jewish students and the Palestinian students. We would have different activities together, we would have different discussions. And the first time that we met, I was super excited. For me, it would be the first time as a 24-year-old girl in Israel that I would even talk to a Palestinian girl. If I would to see a Palestinian, it was only if there was like a terror attack in Israel and I would see them on the news. But besides that, I don't have a chance to see them. So for me, it was an incredible opportunity to get to talk to them, to get them to hear me, to hear them, to understand the situation better. Maybe, I didn't think we would bring the peace, but maybe find an agreement, compromise on something. So really, we met, and, as girls the same age, we were all 24, 25, we had a lot in common. We talked about boys, about school. It was really, really nice. But when politics came into the discussion, it was like a completely different world. And trust me, I listened and I heard, and the situation in Gaza, it's not simple, it's hard. But when I wanted to tell about my situation in Israel, me having to serve in the army, me going through as a teenager of 5 years of intifada, that meant buses blowing up, shopping malls, 5 years. I didn't know if I can leave my house. I didn't know if I can meet my friend in the shopping mall because maybe there would be a terrorist there who would decide to explode himself. But I just couldn't get to them. I couldn't. They kept on asking me again and again and again, how could it be? How could it be that I support the peace process so much, but I still served in the army? How could it be that I served in the army, my parents served in the army, my friends, my whole family? And for me, I was just so frustrated because I just realized that if they don't get that basic thing about the Israeli society, that Israel would not exist without an army, so how could we agree on anything else? Remember this story because we will come back to it later.
So, hi, thank you all for being here and for having us. It is a great honor to be here, and we're very happy that you all came out. My name is Aviad, I'm 30. I'm married to Aviva and have father to Doron, Yair, Nili, and Maya. Yes, that's right, you counted right. I have 4 children, I got married when I was about 5. Well, seriously, so I was actually born here in Boston, and my 2 American-born and raised parents moved to Israel. I grew up there in a small town a little south of Jerusalem. My mother actually graduated from Columbia about 40 years ago. After high school, as every boy and girl in Israel has to do, I joined the IDF. I joined an infantry unit called Givati. I got accepted to the Special Forces. And I served there as a combat medic between 2006 and 2009. And in that time, and the years since, until present day, I serve in the reserves unit as a combat medic. I took part in all the major military operations in the past years in Gaza since 2006, as well as many smaller scale ops in Gaza and in the West Bank. On Friday, July 18th, 2014, I got the call that we were expecting that I was going to get, that I need to leave my 3 children and my pregnant wife and my business that I own and manage, and to go down to the south, to the Gaza border, because the infantry entrance to Gaza, part of the Operation Protective Edge, is going to start, and the relevant reserves unit are being called up. The operation came after months, and really after years, since 2004, of escalating year after year rocket and missile shooting at populated Israeli civilian towns. And at that time, the missiles were reaching already Tel Aviv and Yerushalayim, but the main mass of them we're talking about 10s, 20, sometimes up to hundreds within a few days of missiles and rockets being shot at the towns in the south of Israel, Beersheba, Ashkelon, and all the closer towns to the border itself, like Sderot and all the smaller towns. During that time that we were at the border, then, sorry, I'll just go back. The operation's goal was to destroy the capability, really, of the Hamas to shoot the missiles and find their storing and producing stashes, the launching pads, and in addition also to locate and destroy the attack tunnels that they have been building to go into Israel, into Israeli towns, to execute kidnapping and murderous attacks on Israeli civilians. All in all, after elaborating on the causes, I think you could all agree that this was pretty much a cause that everybody could get behind, just giving a normal life to almost all the Israeli civilians who were in the range at that time. If you, Timna, if you go on forward, you could see the ranges of, here, you see these are, we're talking about, this is Gaza over here. Now, these are the close range towns, and these are the amount of seconds that they have from when they hear that the missile has left Gaza, what we call Tseva Adom, until they have to be in shelter. So in these over here, these are Hevel Lachish, Sderot, you're talking about 15 seconds from when they hear that a missile has been shot at them until they have to be in a safe area or on the ground with their hands on their head. During that time, because of the obvious legitimacy of the cause, the fighting in Gaza was in national consensus. Civilians from all over the country, but especially the ones from the south, who were feeling for years like sitting ducks, were sending packages of donations and to the fighting units in next to the border. They were driving with their 4x4s through agricultural fields to get to us in the front line, and then bypassing the military police who blocked off the area just so they could get to us and give us hot meals and underwear. Anyways, we were there it went on for about 3.5 weeks, and we all left there in a feeling that it was not easy, not on a personal level, definitely not on a combat level, but that it was something very important, and that, like as I said, national consensus. But a few months later, a report started coming out about the operation. Now, we never thought that the international reports would be fair, but when an Israeli NGO came out with a report trying to present Israeli soldiers as war criminals and claimed that the moral codes of the army were thrown out the window, then it really touched the nerve. The report picked up traction not only abroad as was expected, but also in Israel. And hundreds and thousands of Israeli soldiers who fought either in that summer in Gaza, but also in whenever. I mean, everybody has a son, a brother, a father, or they themselves who served in some sort of combat unit. Then everybody was feeling that this is not the story, that they were being misrepresented, and it really hurt. So one of those soldiers was Avichai Shoshan, who decided to write a Facebook post. He started off this post with the words, "Also, I'm breaking the silence." And he just went on to share his personal experiences of fighting in Gaza and in the West Bank. And he ended this post with the hashtag #MyTruth. He woke up the next day with thousands of likes, shares, and comments to his post. And slowly, soldiers, reserve soldiers, because when you're doing your first 3 years, you're not allowed to share anything, but reserve soldiers, then they started putting up their own stories and sharing their experiences from fighting in the different fronts that we are forced into in our country. They opened a Facebook page under the name of MyTruth in order to gather all these stories. Now, what's important that you just understand is that this wasn't an act of what we call hasbara. This wasn't trying to make some political gain or anything. This was really just a protest coming from a soldier who felt like he was being misrepresented. And it came from a real place of pain. So later on, Avichai, Shachar, and Matan, the three leaders of the organization, made this movement into an organization to provide a platform for Israeli soldiers to share their experiences. And Timna now will share her story.
These are a few pictures from my life. You can see here with my family, me as a baby, me as a soldier. So I'm 27 years old, and I grew up in a small town called Mevaseret Zion near Jerusalem. And my name, Timna, is actually a big national park in Israel. And my story is 27 years ago, in 1990, May, I was born. And, you know, I'm very pretty today, but as a baby, I was extraordinary. And the government, they just said, oh my God, okay, we have to create something. So they created the park on my name. So the park is in the desert near Eilat, and my parents they love the desert. My father's a tour guide. The desert is his favorite place in the country, so he decided to call his daughter on a big place in the desert. Because I grew up in a family that I knew loves Israel. That's probably the only thing that I knew about. My family is very weird. But I knew that I'm growing up in a family that values the land. And when I turned 18 or 17, when I started thinking about what I want to do in the army, I knew it had to be something meaningful. I knew I can't make coffee for commanders. I can't sit all day on computer typing in data. I have to be in the field. Now, not like Aviad, I'm not tough enough to be a combat soldier, but I did want it to be with combat soldiers. And I knew about myself that I love talking in front of people. I think I'm good at it. I know people like listening to me and doing what I say. So I wanted to be an instructor. So that's the only thing I knew when I recruited into the army, that I'm going to teach soldiers something in infantry. As the training began, I got my posting, and they told me that I have to teach soldiers how to use different kinds of weapons, how to shoot, how to aim, how to fold up the weapons and walk with them. Now, me, as an 18-year-old girl, who knew that she loves guiding, she loves talking to people, but what's my connection to weapons? I come from a liberal family. I have I didn't even know what to do with this posting. So I want to ask you, you're 18, you're in a country where you have to go into the army, and you get a position that you have to teach soldiers how to shoot weapons. What do you do? Anybody? Okay, you just do it. Anybody else? All right. So it was a major dilemma for me, because on one hand I understand, yeah, this is my posting, this is what the army wants me to do, I have to do it. But on the other hand, I don't know, I don't want to teach soldiers how to kill people. It's scary. But as the training progressed, I understood that the main focus of the army is not so much how to shoot, but more something that we say in Hebrew, we call it Tohar HaNeshek. Tohar HaNeshek is teaching soldiers that they cannot use their weapon unless they're 100% sure that they're being shot at or somebody is threatening their life. If they're not 100% sure that the guy in front of them has intention of killing them, or the place that they're shooting at is a terrorist house or something or some house that's hiding weapons, they don't shoot, they don't touch the weapon. That's the basic value of the Israeli army. If you wake up any soldier in the IDF in the middle of the night, he'll say the same thing. Tohar HaNeshek is something that combat soldiers, infantry soldiers or whatever, that's what they go into combat, with Tohar HaNeshek. They don't do anything without that very clearly in their mind. So that basically solved my dilemma, because I understood that the army, we can't survive in Israel without an army. And I'm teaching these soldiers to be the best soldiers that they can be. Never to harm innocent people, but only to use their weapon when they have to. And for me, that made my service meaningful and amazing. I have some pictures, I forgot about them. So this is my father and both older brothers. They're all tour guides on bikes in Israel, so if you're interested, Rockman. And this is me in the army as a soldier. They asked me to model, so I said, okay. Aviad, it's your turn.
Okay, so the story that I'm going to tell you will bring maybe some of these values that Timna was talking about down to down to the field level. And it's basically a story of, it's an abbreviated version of a few days that occurred in the winter of 2008. In which my unit, as we said, the Special Forces of Givati, we entered Gaza in one of the first attempts to stop and eliminate the rocket shooting that was escalating at the time. And I hope that through this story you will get a sense, first of all, of what it is to be in that situation, to be a soldier in that situation, but also maybe to try to put yourself in the shoes of these commanders and of these very young commanders, 23, 24, making not easy decisions and making them in a very short time frame. So my squad and I were actually in the Egyptian border at the time when this all started. It was a Thursday night. We were sitting around the bonfire because what we were doing there wasn't very interesting. And our squad commander comes running to us and he says that one of the dozens of rockets that were being shot at Israeli towns at that time, it was really only being shot at the very close range towns. These are some pictures from that week, actually. There was one kid killed a few days earlier in Sderot, and one of the rockets hit a kindergarten. It was that Thursday, and the government finally decided that there was nobody hurt. Sorry, I didn't mention that. There was nobody hurt in the kindergarten. There was nobody in the kindergarten, but the government decided that this was enough and that we're going in. So now I'm just going to explain a little bit of something, generally speaking, okay? Do any of you remember the disengagement in 2005, the Itnatkut? Yeah. Okay, so basically the Israeli government, led at the time by Ariel Sharon, decided to evacuate all the Israeli civilians and army bases from the Gaza Strip into the new Israeli border, which was on the fence of the Gaza Strip. And to leave, it was about 8,000 Israeli civilians. We're talking about synagogues, schools, cemeteries, all uplifted until the last one. Not one Israeli left in Gaza. The hope was that this might lead to some new reality. They were talking then about the Singapore of the Middle East. What happened, in fact, was that the terrorists from the Hamas, who are a militant Islamic fundamentalist group, took over the Gaza Strip from the PLO, who were the former regime, threw them off the roofs. And you see some pictures here from the Hamas taking over offices in Gaza, and they were very happy about it. And what they did is turn all these small Palestinian towns on the border into military bases and make them into rocket manufacturers and launching pads and storing arms. And we're talking about from civilian homes on in towns that were close to the border. And we'll get back to those towns soon. The other thing that you need to understand is that generally speaking, when you're talking about military operations, you're talking about, at the very least, especially of this magnitude, you're talking about the very least several days of preparation. You need to learn the maps. You need to learn what the operations goals are. You need to get your gear ready, your weapons, and you need to, most importantly maybe, coordinate with all the other friendly forces who are going into this operation, because when you're talking about operations that are more than a few companies, then you have a lot of things to coordinate. But 24 hours later, Friday night, faces painted, heavy bags on our back, helmets on our head. We're standing there about 5 kilometers away from Sajaiya. We were right next to Kfar Aza. What you see there, the red dot, that's actually Sajaiya. Gaza City is actually over there on the bottom. It's more to the center. But that's Sajaiya, where the red dot is. We're standing about 5 kilometers away from the fence because we didn't want to be seen. And we're ready to walk in towards Sajaiya, and which at that time was being used as mostly Hamas terrorists storing and shooting rockets, preparing for defending those stashes of missiles, ammunition, and arms. And as we're standing there making the last preparations to start walking, the battalion commander calls up my squad. We were leading the way in, so he wanted us to get a head start. He wanted to talk to us right before we left. So he calls us in. We're all he calls us aside. We all stand there, silence down right before he starts talking, and boom! About 100 meters away from us, rocket falls, and we all sort of look around to see that everybody's okay and that it didn't hit anything over there. And we look back to the commander, and he's sort of half smiling, and he says, "I've said enough. You all know what you're going to do. You all know what we're here for, and I hope to see you all on the way out." The walk-in itself wasn't uneventful. Our very skilled front navigator and our squad commander already noticed very shortly after we crossed the fence that we were being watched by a scouter. So the whole idea behind starting walking early and going a quiet entry was basically obsolete at that point. But nevertheless, we still needed to proceed in that format of a quiet entry, meaning no tanks, no armored vehicles, no artillery, no choppers, just infantry. So now just at this point I want to ask you, if you were to plan a military operation that is meant to weed out terrorist cells in a civilian town, what do you think would be the correct approach to do such thing? How about I give you the spectrum? We could start from one side. We could bomb their brains out the same way that they're doing to our civilians. Just shoot regardless of the consequences, and hope that we'll hit the terrorists and maybe at least make them afraid that they won't do it again. The other spectrum, the other side could maybe be not doing anything at all. And anybody have any ideas? Going from home to home, but also going from home to home. In 2009, when we went in and cast lead, or in 2014 when we went in protective edge, then you go in from home to home. But first, what the Air Force does is they drop fake bombs that don't actually, they just make loud noises but don't cause any damage, and send flyers from the air and tell all the civilians, we're coming in to get the terrorists. If you're aiding terrorists, or if you're next to them, then you should go and get away from anyone who is dealing with terrorism so that you don't get hurt. But that also has a downside. The downside is that the terrorists leave, and many times they even force the civilians to stay because they want the imagery of their civilians being killed. They're using their houses as launching pads. They're already taking their own civilians as hostage. They don't mind them getting killed by us. It's actually what they want. So, anyways, what we did in this time was, now again, this wasn't our decision, obviously. This is a strategic decision, but the meaning of this decision is that we are expecting civilians to be on the ground. We expect them to be in the houses. We expect them to be all around because they're not warned to leave. So the terrorists, now we already know that the terrorists are watching us because we saw a scouter who probably reported back, but the civilians are still civilians and we cannot harm them. So, as we started to see the first houses of Sajaiya, the first roadside bomb went off, and fire was opened from the side onto our force. It was aimed at the company who was behind us, and nobody was hurt from the first explosion. From the shooting, then some soldiers were injured from the company who was following us, and our squad leader or commander led us into the first house that we were supposed to go into. Now, as I said, we're under fire. A bomb just went off, but the house where we needed to go into was not in any way a combative house. We knew that it was strategically positioned, and that's why we wanted to go into it first, because we expected it maybe to be booby-trapped. We expected the terrorists to be there. It's on the first line, but on the other hand, nobody shot at us from that house. And we assumed that there might be civilians in that house. So we go in with no shooting at the house or in the house until shot upon. And that's what we did. There was a family in the house, in fact, who remained unharmed. But we didn't find, the house wasn't booby-trapped and there were no terrorists in that house. The other medic and myself set up one of the rooms to treat the wounded who came in from the other company. They were very superficially wounded in their legs from gunshots, and they were in good spirits. And all in all, the first stage of engagement was completed. Very shortly after, these are pictures of things that were found, not in that specific operation, but in civilian homes. So it was time to move in deeper into the village, to the next marked location. Still, we're talking about no tanks, no artillery. Even though they already know that we're there, we still don't want to scare away all the terrorists also, because we want to find them. We want to get them because we want to enable their disable their ability to continue disrupting and threatening and killing Israelis by shooting their rockets. So we set out, only our squad this time, to move to the next location. About 20 guys. Approaching the next house, we reached the fence and a land drop. We were going through some field, and we were getting close to the house that we needed to get to. And there was a land drop, a fence that we didn't see from the maps that we got very shortly before the operation. You couldn't really see that there was a land drop. So the commander sort of told us all to kneel, and he started fiddling with the fence, trying to see if we could get by it or we could bypass it in some way. And then fire is shot in his direction. He falls back. The rock that was in front of him exploded, like got hit and he fell back from the impact, but he was actually not injured from that. The front commander, the head navigator, the front navigator, Doron Asulin, sees the source of the fire, and he's very cautious because he thinks that it might be friendly forces because, as I said, this is a very abrupt operation, so he's trying to be as careful as he can. He waits a second, he asks who is it, shoots 2 rounds, and is answered with a burst of fire in his direction. He falls back, and I was a few meters away from him. I ran over, he had no pulse, he wasn't breathing. I started to apply respiratory assistance when the rest of my squad sort of lined up in front of me towards the direction of the fire to give me cover, and me and the wounded, obviously, cover so that we could continue with the treatment. I'm continuing with that. The commander is looking for a way to get to the house. After he realizes that he can't, and that now we have also a new situation on our hand, then he decides to enter a different house. Now again, we're under fire. We have a wounded now, so we're now getting him onto a stretcher, and we need to find it's another thing that we need to carry. But the house that he decided to enter was a civilian house. We go in without fire. We go in without not in the house, not on the house. We go in as if it's a civilian house, because that's what it is. And regardless of the fact that we're being shot at from a different direction, and it's very risky to open up another front of fire. The house that the commander decided to enter was a civilian house, and we did not fire until we were fired upon. At that point, I had already found a gunshot entry in Doron's chest. I realized my respiratory assistance was futile. I later learned from Doron's father that he died from the bullet that went into his chest. It ruptured his aorta, so he was probably dead within the first few seconds it took me to get to him. During the next 48 hours, we found ammunition, rockets, launching pads, guns, and military-like stations in and near civilian home. And Operation Cast Lead, Operation Warm Winter ended after only 48 hours, which was half the time that it was meant to be due to the fulfillment of all the goals of the operation. My squad and myself re-entered Gaza by the end of that week again.
To take you back to me and the Palestinian girls, so I'm sitting there feeling, as I said, very frustrated, because every Israeli, every one of us, everybody lost someone. A brother, father, friend, spouse. And to hear that from people that we were supposed to live together, it was offensive for me. What I didn't tell you is when I was a child, I lost my brother when he was a soldier. And my brother, he chose to commit suicide. But that doesn't mean that me and my brothers, we all served in the army. Both of my older brothers were combat soldiers. We were not angry at the army because we understood the importance of the army in Israel. You have to understand, no army in Israel means no Israel. So what we try to do today is to represent by our stories thousands of other stories that some are very similar to our stories. We're talking about soldiers that are 18, 19, 20 that have to take very, very hard decisions sometimes. Sometimes they have minutes, sometimes they have a few seconds to make decisions that are life-changing. The army, the Israeli army, isn't perfect. We deal with a very, very complicated situation, a very delicate situation. And sometimes we make mistakes, and we deal with them. And I think that the truth here is so important, because to try to understand the situation from a Facebook post or from some news broad that you hear and you don't really understand, that's impossible. To try to really understand the Israeli situation, you have to really talk to Israelis that experience or the army or the life in Israel. So if you want to hear more, if you want to support My Truth, please follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, everything. We need your support. We need you to be our ambassadors on campus, in the States, in New York, wherever. Thank you so much.
I'm curious how you rationalize being right there then, the approach of just going in with foot soldiers, no helicopters, no armored vehicles, and you lost a fellow soldier due to being extremely careful and politically correct. And I just question that.
Okay, it's a complicated answer, and I'll try to answer all of it. The first part of it is, if I know how many of them would want to slaughter my children, I don't. And I don't think that we could speak in those terms, especially not, I mean, this isn't me being politically correct. This is, I think, as an organization, I don't represent the army, but I think as people, we can't assume that because that many of them do want to kill us, then we could go in with no regard to their safety. And as long as they're non-combative, then again, I'm not saying that if you find a stash in their baby's bed, then you act in the same cautiousness as you do if you don't. But as far as you're concerned, when you're approaching a house that hasn't shot at you, then you can't treat it just because of that the collective of the Palestinians who live there might want you dead. And that's the army's approach, and I think that it connects to what Timna was saying. The Toar HaNeshek, the purity of our actions, needs to be that we could look at ourselves in the mirror and say that we did our best not to hurt the non-combative. And to, I think, conclude all of it, I'll say that I'm very close to Doron Asulin's father. And I don't think that for a second he feels that his son was sacrificed in order to protect some politically correctness. I think that the ideals of the army are that we don't shoot at non-combative civilians. And if that means that sometimes we put ourselves at risk, but it gives ourselves the legitimacy to continue operating the way we do and protecting our country the way we do, I think that it's worth it. And just to conclude all of that, I'll say that going in with extreme force doesn't always mean less casualties. It doesn't always mean more, but it just doesn't mean that no one could guarantee that if that operation would have started with bombarding artillery and tanks, like we did, as I said, in 2009 and in 2014, there were more people killed, more soldiers killed. So it's not black and white, and I think that at the end of the day, as long as we conduct ourselves in a way that we feel is moral and just, then I think that gives legitimacy to the rest of our actions.
If you see a terrorist about to launch a rocket, they're not shooting at you, but they're about to launch a rocket into an Israeli kindergarten. Does that mean you can't shoot that person?
Oh, we're shooting them.
Oh, okay, I just wanted to make sure of that.
Yeah. They're shooting at our children.
So that's
yeah, definitely.
Okay. And secondly, I would hope that your source of ethics to not go into a civilian home and so forth comes internally, and that you're not doing it for the rest of the world thinking good of you, because whether you do that or not, most of the rest of the world hates Jews and hates Israelis whether you go into war with flowers or whether you go into war with a nuclear bomb, they feel the same way about us.
We're not, I think we agree, but I will say that a lot of these decisions are made on a strategic level, like the deciding how to go into an operation, if you're going to go in quietly or not. That's not on the level of, that's definitely not my level, and it's not my commander's, and not the brigade commander's level either. But at the end of the day, the person who's going to need to look at these soldiers when they, if something happens to them, the commander who's going to need to look at their parents in the eye is my level. It's kids who are 23, and they're not thinking about CNN. They're thinking about protecting their squad, about protecting their friends, and but at the same time, it's not about CNN or the BBC. We're not expecting them to clap their hands, but there are moral codes that we obey to.
What you're trying to do is, as I understand it, is to be the contra to breaking the silence, Shovrim Shtika, which some of you know. And I actually think that what your message you're trying to pass is the formal Israeli message. I mean, why does it take an NGO to pass the formal government message? I mean, we have the IDF spokesperson, there's diplomatic people all over the world presenting Israel. I mean, I don't have an easier way to ask it, but why do we need you to present the formal Israeli message?
Well, it's a good question. First of all, I don't feel that I'm here representing the Israeli message. I'm not told to say anything by anyone, and this NGO was created, was born in an effort to bring the voices from the field level, from my level. I don't need to speak for the government. I don't need to agree with the government policy. And I don't agree with a lot of the government's policy. But I could say that regardless, in this organization, we have people from the whole political spectrum. People who believe in two-state solutions, people believe in one state, whatever. Everything's legitimate. But the idea is that regardless of where you stand on the political spectrum, you still we still know that the army conducts itself in a moral and in a moral code that comes from the ground. Also, it comes from the soldiers themselves. It comes from the bottom, and I think that there is some added value. I mean, you could tell me if there isn't, there isn't. But I think there is some added value in hearing this from the field level, and to hear it through stories and not only through statements of people who are paid to say so.
How do you feel that the Israeli army makes tremendous efforts and risks soldiers in order to satisfy your moral code internally and political correctness externally, where you have people like Doron that loses their lives over that? Do you feel that there's somewhat artificial internal moral code that Israel imposes on its soldiers in order to cater to the outside world?
I don't think it's artificial at all. I think that all soldiers in the army, we grow up with it. As I said, I don't say it just to say it. Every soldier, or almost every soldier, we truly believe it. We truly believe that innocent people shouldn't be targeted and shouldn't be killed. I think when you say something like artificial, it hurts us personally.
I think I agree. It's really not artificial. I'm not trying. Like I said to him also, I'm not abide to any political correctness. I mean, it's not. I'm not here to convince you that we should be less or more aggressive. I think that just look. The bottom line is that I don't think that anybody wants to look at. You don't want to look at the pictures from Syria and say, let's be more like that, you know? Those aren't pleasant pictures, and we don't want to have that on our hands. And I think, look, it's not maybe the best prime minister to bring her quote, but Golda Meir, the Israeli prime minister during Yom Kippur, said, there will come a time where we could forgive the Egyptians for killing our children, but we'll never forgive them for for making our children kill. And I think that we live in a complicated area, and if we don't put the boundary, the line make a very clear line in the sand of what we're gonna do and what we're not gonna do, then it will be even more difficult. And I think that as a soldier who's gonna probably be back in Gaza and a father to 2 boys, I have to say that I think that it's a legitimate cause, trying to uphold a moral standard. It's a legitimate cause to die for and to give your life for. It's part of being part of living in the area that we do.
I thank you both for sharing your stories. They were really powerful. My question is that it seems to me every couple of years Israel is forced to enter Gaza, Operation Cast Lead, Protective Edge, and it's tragic because Israeli soldiers are dying, innocent Palestinians are dying. It's just really sad and horrible situation. But I'm wondering if you see this as an inevitable trend, that it will just have to continue this way. Every couple of years, Israel will have to go in to destroy the terrorist infrastructure, the tunnels, or what do you see as changing in the future? Is there a better long-term solution?
I'm gonna, I'll let Timna answer. I'm just gonna say a word. You asked why we need NGOs that don't speak for Israel. Then this is maybe our prerogative to not have to answer in the name of Israel. I don't know what's gonna be, so.
I don't know either. I don't know either. But personally, I think if we want to get to a better solution, the money that goes into Gaza, from the UN, from the US, from all these different organizations, it has to be controlled. They get millions and millions and millions of dollars, and I don't see 1 cent going to education, to the industry, to economy, to culture, nothing. So if you want to give money, give, but control where it goes. And maybe that will solve the next operation in Gaza.
Yes. You mentioned about wanting the Palestinians to understand your narrative, so I think it's fair that we throw in the Palestinian narrative, which is very clear that there is an occupation, which is the word that has not been used here once, that there is an illegal occupation of Palestine that has been going on, we know for how long. This is very clearly the narrative. I haven't heard the word occupation once. Please respond.
There was a question or just a statement?
Respond to the statement. There's an occupation, and how do you have a moral ethical code when you're conducting what is clearly an illegal occupation?
I'm sorry, I'm maybe not understanding the question. We were talking about the code that we conduct ourselves in combat. The fact that Israel, that part of the Israeli, part of Israelis live in what some people perceive as occupation, some don't, whatever, I call it occupation, I don't care. But it's, in occupation, doesn't have any connection to what we were saying about the way we conduct ourselves in the battlefield. If you want to claim that as long as Israel is in those territories, the Palestinians could slaughter Jews and shoot at them missiles and rockets, as long as there's still Jewish settlements in the West Bank, then I think that you're the one who needs to question your moral code.
Timna, when you started talking, you were mentioning meeting with the Palestinians. You didn't specify whether that's meaning people from the West Bank or Gaza. I'm assuming meaning people from the West Bank.
Yes, from the West Bank.
And having difficulty getting them to have any empathy with your perspective on things. I mean, do you think there's any hope that that will change over time? Is that something you're still working in? Or do you just feel it's a done deal?
It's a hard question that you're asking. I think if we want to start changing that, it has to start in the education. Because I think today the education in the West Bank, in Gaza, it's very anti-Israel. And they're not even trying to accept that they like it, they don't like it. Fact on ground, Israel is here to stay. They have to, I mean, for me, my grandparents are Holocaust survivors. They survived Auschwitz. And I mean, we forgave, you know, the Germans slaughtered 6 million Jews. We forgave them, we have connection with them, we trade with them. I think it's time, if the Palestinians want to move forward and we want to have peace, they have to forgive and they have to forget in order for us to move forward. If for a two-state solution, for one-state solution, whatever solution, people have to move forward, and it has to start in education.
I'm just wondering, what do you mean by moving forward? Because the occupation is ongoing. I mean, it's not like the Holocaust, we have to forgive something that happened 70 years ago, which I actually don't think we forgave, but that's a different thing. What do you mean about moving on when their lives are still ruined on a daily basis by the Israeli occupation?
Again, this is not the really our field of but if you want, I could answer just on a personal level, and I could say that I don't think that there's anyone in Israel, no matter where they are on the political spectrum, or in UN international policies makers or whatever, or organizations, who believe that tomorrow morning all the people who live in the West Bank should just get up and leave. We tried that in the disengagement, and what happened is that the PA's guys, the PLO, were thrown off the roofs and dragged through the cities tied onto motorcycles. So, regardless of what you think the end goal here is, if Israel will be in all the territory or not, or whatever you think or imagine or hope the end goal will be, it does still have to start on just not hating each other so much. And that's what Timna was saying. And I think that again, a lot of people like to just throw the word occupation. It's all your fault. So I'm not even talking about if there is or why we're in those places, why we're in those territories. This isn't a history lesson. All I could say is that regardless, we still need to start. They need to take all those inciting textbooks out of the schools. They need to stop praising martyrs and naming schools after them and roads after them. Once they start with those basic steps, then maybe we could start talking, and maybe one day we could either live in peace or live separately, or anyone with their imaginative hopes, and it's all okay. But it still has to start with that.
My question is, it's about the morality of the IDF and how when the IDF soldiers are basically held to this moral standard where they're put in this position where they have to put their lives before the lives of those they're fighting against. How is that moral?
When I am now in reserves, or when I was in the army, then I was a soldier. It was my job. It is every soldier's job to sometimes put his life at risk to protect his country. And putting your life at risk sometimes includes also taking certain risks to not just go in and with total disregard to civilian lives on the other side. I, with respect, don't want people to think that we're like the Russian army who just bombs from the air and doesn't with total disregard to civilian lives. That's not the army that I want to be a part of, and it's not the army that I was a part of. And when I'm a soldier, then there are certain risks that I need to take.
There's a difference between armies that just kill civilians from the opposite side versus an army that puts their soldiers above those of the enemies.
And it's a delicate line that I think will always be will always be tough to decide where you are and what measures, what's more important than what risks you do take, what risks you don't. That's I think why we're here, to explain that these are complicated decisions. Some of them are on higher levels, some of them are on lower levels, and a lot of them are made by 22-year-olds, and it's complicated. And I think that part of the reason that this organization got such quick response by so many soldiers is because that we who served and were in these situations, or who were training soldiers to conduct themselves in that way, we know that we put ourselves through a lot in order to uphold these codes. So it's very offensive when people say that we don't. And because, I mean, we've seen with our own eyes people get killed because of things like that. So, I mean, and the testimonies of My Truth with Timna as an expert on, she could go on and on about cases of soldiers who put themselves like in really like situations that they know, I'm putting myself now in a huge risk because I'm not going to involve a civilian, or because I'm not going to risk that this old man who's now having a heart attack while I'm in his house, I'm not going to risk not sending him to the hospital because he might die just because I don't want to get exposed. These are real stories. And it's thin lines, and these are decisions that are being made on a daily basis by very young boys and girls, and that's what we're here to tell you about.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.